parents, the child goes to the teacher who will guide that child.
What do you mean by external moral authority? You use that expression a lot.
Materialism has to do with when you are
Hello, it's great to have all of you back in this episode of the Course in Values and Spirituality. Today we will be covering the subject of material and mathematical values. This may be news to some of you as to whether values exist as far as these headings are concerned. And to this end, we will be listening to Sister Denise, who has been sharing her ideas and her wisdom with us throughout this series. Sister Denise, very warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
Tell me, when it comes to material values, I'd like to start with what you said in the first line of material values. You said that material values are based on the desirability and durability of any commodity as well as its rarity, and you give the example of diamonds and gold. Why is material values important for the purposes of this course, and what is it that you wanted the viewer to know as far as this is concerned?
You can talk about values in terms of the spiritual side of values, the human values, the qualities, inner, invisible, intangible. But the word value applies just as well to something physical as it does to something spiritual. And so I want people to understand that value is not the same thing as virtue. Value means it has a value. That means you can give it a monetary value. You know, you pay a price. If you love, there's sacrifice involved in it, and there's a reward. So you pay a price and you get something for what you pay for. People really understand giving and getting and paying and receiving in a material way. A value can apply just as well to something physical as something non-physical. A value is how highly you prize that thing, what you are prepared to pay for it. So people want gold, they want diamonds, because they hold their value over an endless period of time. If you buy a potato, it's not going to hold its value very long. It's not going to be also all that expensive. I want to make people very aware that a value is not the same as a virtue. But in regular parlance, people tend to use the word values to apply to spiritual principles. But value, the word value, applies just as well to, you know, money or commodity or anything that you can buy has a value. Now, do you pay the right price, too much? Do you get a good deal? That's also all about values. And this is why we must talk about material values and indeed mathematical values, because it's quantification. Values is about quantification and about the prioritization.
Are you saying that individuals should ask themselves what value they place on what things, and what is the reason for this?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it inquires as to where you are at in terms of your priorities in life.
You see, in order to have what's called happiness, happiness not as an emotion, but happiness in the sense of your needs are fulfilled, you need material. That means you need money, you need stuff, because you have a body, you have to maintain it. It requires food, clothing, transportation, rest. These are all material items that have a material price. Now you also need relationships. Relationships are not material. Relationships are, you can say, emotional. You also need health. Because you want, in order to have happiness, you want to have the least amount of suffering, greatest amount of joy. Now, you are a spiritual being in a physical body, operating in the physical world, which means you have to be able to work with spiritual values as well as material values. And you cannot say that matter doesn't have any importance because I'm a spirit. Yes, I'm a spirit, but I'm in a body, and so matter has importance, and we need to understand the relative value of different things. And we also need to know how to assign value to material things. If we assign too much value, or we give full importance to matter, and we disregard our emotional needs, then we're going out of balance, and we will pay a very high price for disregarding the requirement of taking care of our emotional needs, our social needs, our health needs. You see, this is why we have to look at all the types of values.
You go on to say, the value of material objects is largely determined by their intrinsic qualities and to the extent to which society finds them useful and necessary.
One of the things that many times people have a problem with is pieces of art being sold for very, very high prices, you see. And we talked at one point about aesthetic values. Why is great art valuable? One of the reasons is because it's very rare. One of the reasons is that it holds its value. So a good piece of good art fetches a high price because the market can maintain it. People hold that thing in high value, and it's like an investment that's moved around. So you have that. When it comes to something more everyday, people give a lot of importance to gold and diamonds. When a girl gets married and the family gives her gold and diamonds, it's an insurance. She doesn't traditionally have bank account, the ability or right to earn her own money, run her own business in traditional societies. So she's given gold and diamonds and so on, and that's her wealth that she wears on her body. And any time there's any special need, that wealth can be turned into money. And in fact, in traditional societies, everybody wears their wealth on their body, and then they will turn that wealth into cash for particular purposes. Then when that purpose is finished, they'll bring it back into the wealth and into the gold and diamonds because it holds its value. And so in that way, people protect themselves against the rigors of poverty and destitution, you see. And a person has a right to have enough money, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes people equate spirituality with disregard of money.
And are you saying that's a fallacy?
It is a fallacy, yes.
Tell us more, because there are many who believe that one cannot and should not be both spiritual and rich. And by the same token, there are many people who also feel that spirituality means that it's okay to be ill all the time.
Being poor, being sick, is a punishment for bad karma. It's not an indicator of spirituality. And so there are some religions which are based on the idea that money is Maya. Or in Christianity they say money is the root of all evil. And in some ways I think it's a bit of propaganda so that the wealthy people have less competition.
That's almost cynical.
Well, it's a bit cynical, but you know, it is true.
Yeah.
And so I challenge some of these ideas which are created by the patriarchy, the ruling deciders of what's good and bad and what's right or wrong. And causing people who are deprived to enjoy being deprived by false pretenses, you see. So what I would say is that you have a right to have enough money, enough for your needs. When a person is evaluating what I need, there are a few different criteria. You have basic fundamental needs for survival, but that's not enough. You also need to be fulfilled and to do what you need to do in order to fulfill your higher potential. I feel that these are also rights. If you say, I have to have this so that somebody else cannot have it, that's different. When you enrich yourself, according to the philosophy of karma, your rising, your enrichment also enriches others. Then it's a win-win situation. Everybody thrives.
I would now like to take you through to the next subject entitled Mathematical Values. You start off by saying mathematical values can act as an interface with universal values and are capable of describing values which are non-material in a definite way. I found that line to be somewhat cryptic. Could you decode it for us, please?
Something intangible is difficult to quantify, difficult to define. Mathematics is like a language which allows you to give a value to something relative to something else. And when you put things in mathematical terms, it very often makes it easier to understand how valuable or less valuable this thing is, you see. Take a very subtle thing like love, family love. So if somebody is not aware of the value of family love, it can be explained to that person using mathematics. Medical people very often help people to express the level of pain they're having, and they say from a value of 1 to 10, you know, where 10 is really bad pain and 1 is not too bad, what's your level of pain? Because if you ask somebody, does it hurt, they say it's really bad, but then how bad is really bad? So that they will use a simple scale of 1 to 10 to assess how much pain somebody is in, because pain is totally subjective. You can assess it a little bit with blood pressure and so on, but otherwise it's quite subjective. Some of these other intangible things, you just assign a number to it. It helps you to be able to get a perspective on it, and that's why I think it's really helpful.
Well, I would also like to know what you mean by the following line. They are useful where there is a confusion regarding human values. For instance, when assessing performance or taking decisions by applying numerical values, charts or percentages, one can ascertain which course has the optimum value.
Making decisions can sometimes be very difficult. Is it better to do this, which will not hurt somebody's feelings, but then if I do that, then this person will lose out and I will be sidestepped? It becomes very intangible. You don't know which is more and more or less important. So start to apply numbers to it. It becomes clearer. When you start to use words that correspond to feelings, which are very subjective, it's just making it objective from subjective. So mathematical values really help you to see it as it really is. But it's really making the intangible more tangible.
Wherever there's a conflict in moral and ethical values, posing the problem in mathematical terms can create a position of clarity and help arrive at a solution. How practical is this, Sister Denise? Do people resort to this way of functioning when they need to make a decision, to reduce it to writing and say, go this way or that way? Is
yes,
practical?
It's very practical, very practical. But the thing is, not many people know about it, not many people do it. But those who do know about it and do it, they have great ease. And you know, earlier I was talking about the need to educate yourself, and knowing how to put the different ethical dilemmas that you may be facing, or moral dilemmas you may be facing, in numerical terms. It really makes the way to resolve the situation much easier, much clearer.
You used an expression when you were facing ethical or moral dilemmas. What I'm wondering, as I listen to you speak in this session and in other sessions, the way the course is designed is for an individual to go within, assess where they're at, and arrive at a decision. What I know from my own experience, as well as the experience of friends and family members, is that when we find ourselves faced with a difficult problem, which life sends, well, if you're lucky, once a day, we tend to not rely on our own resources, and we tend to call a friend and say, this is the position I am in, what should I do? What I notice that this entire course is teaching you to not go there, but to get in here and find the answer there. How do you learn to trust yourself to make a decision for you? Especially if you have a history of making wrong decisions. Not necessarily every decision you made is wrong, but you've made mistakes in the past. How do you learn to trust yourself using what you just said?
I think your greatest friend and asset is a clear conscience. If you don't consult your conscience and you just make decisions based on emotions, that'll always be a bad decision. And it is said, you know, if you are in the heat of passion, don't make a decision. Wait till you've cooled down.
Oh, I think every one of us has fallen into the trap of making some disastrous decisions when we are emotional.
Well, this is why it has to be spelled out. Whenever you're emotional, any decision that you make in the cool light of day will be considered by yourself and everybody else to be really stupid, because passion distorts your ability to judge.
I'm surprised to hear you say that, because I didn't equate passion with being a weakness or a vice. I see passion as being an athlete who's passionate about her sport, is training hard to become an Olympic athlete. A passionate law student who aspires to become an advocate or a barrister. A passionate medical student wants to become a successful nurse or surgeon. You're shaking your head. Tell me what is wrong with the passion.
You see, if you're a passionate medical student, it doesn't mean you're in a state of passion all the time you're studying.
I mean, you feel passionately about the subject matter that you're studying.
I think it's a misuse of the word passionate.
Okay.
You can say, okay, this is my passion. I am strongly motivated in this area, but it doesn't mean that you're in an emotional turmoil.
No, it doesn't.
You see.
So
passion is when you're not in your normal state. So if you say, okay, I'm passionate about medicine, that means that you're using this word passionate to refer to that you are strongly motivated. But strong motivation isn't actually passion. There are a lot of words that get misused or used differently to what their actual meaning is. And because it's used so widespread, it becomes added to the meaning. But when you're in a state of emotional arousal, put it that way, if you take a different word, don't make a decision.
Well, that's sage advice, but I think you cause the viewer to look at the passion with new eyes.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, okay. So, Sister Denise, once one is armed with understanding material values and mathematical values, where to from here?
I think what we're being asked to do here is to say to ourselves, okay, I really need to understand the philosophy of karma, because it's a law. It's a law that governs action between you and yourself, between yourself and other people, that will affect your future, that will affect your circumstances, and so on. And the other thing is, it's talking to us about accountability and responsibility. So whenever I make a decision, if it goes wrong, it's my fault. But people don't like that. They will look for somebody else to blame, you see. Or even if it's the weather or anything, you know. But we want to say, okay, in the cool light of day, looking at everything to be taken into consideration, what is the next best move to make, you know? So it's teaching people to be strategic, to be realistic, to take a look at the long-term consequences of what they're doing, to learn how to make assessments. You may have to take risk, but it's a calculated risk. It's not a reckless risk, you see. So all of it is about being realistic, down to earth, having equanimity, and not being reactive. It's really being proactive, and really sitting with the self and saying, this is me and this is what I'm going to do, and I understand the risks and the consequences, and I'm prepared to face the results of my actions.
I'm glad you mentioned not being reactive, because many of us find ourselves in that position where you know that you shouldn't come under the influence of your emotions. You know that you do not want to be in a certain way, but then something happens, something triggers your anger, your irritation, one of your dark side aspects, and you fly off the handle. How does one stop that using the knowledge that you just shared?
Well, you have to practice it. And I think to create a personal ethical policy for yourself, that in any situation where I would become emotionally aroused, I will in advance have a course of action. And my course of action has to be, I'll give you a response later, something like that, you see.
I think this brings us to the end of today's session. Would you like to leave the viewer with some last words before we say goodbye?
I think to give a commitment to oneself to be cool, calm and collected, and then decide what to do.
That is sage advice indeed. Sister Denise has taken us today through material values and mathematical values, and although it may not be something that you've thought about in the past, it's a very refreshing look at where our priorities are in life, what is important to you, and more specifically, why is it important to you? Are your priorities in order? Are you assigning the right amount of value to what you consider to be valuable? And again, I liked how Sister Denise brought the law of karma into operation by telling us to always be aware of it, and using it as a yardstick and as a guide to make decisions. So very profound message indeed. Sister Denise, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you, viewer, for joining us. I hope to see you again for the next session. Take care. Goodbye.